late, because then you're working harder. Right, so here we are. Welcome to this evening's executive minutes. Hang on a minute. Just to say, some meeting housekeeping before we start. Remind you all, mobile phones on silent. We'll turn them off. There are no fire alarms. Please remain focused. If there is a fire alarm, the normal ways, please, out through the back by the blitz tree. Please remain focused on all the topics being discussed. Questions should be directed to the chair and specific to the item and the answer to the chair. Please respect other members and the position of the chair. That's nice. Right. Thank you. On a serious note, before we start, what I do want to say is some of us knew him, many didn't, but we all knew or know Alderman that was Councillor Owen Foggin. Sadly, Gerald, our husband, passed away yesterday. Many of us knew Gerald, good supporter, very supportive of Owen, and we would want to send our commiserations and condolences to Owen and the Foggin family on the death of Gerald. So I do know Owen from time to time watches this. Maybe not tonight, but we are doing something obviously through the Labour Party and the Labour group, but I just thought I would mention it. I think it's very important. So if we support Owen if we see her. So that's what I wanted to say. So apologies, I don't believe we've got any apologies today. Minutes of the 1st of October. Can I have a mover and seconder that I sign these as a true record? I move.
Seconded.
Councillor Wright, thank you. Declarations of interest, please. You know the drill on declaring interest. If you please on any item, please let us know. There is no part 2 items this evening. Number 5, see there's only 10 items on the agenda and number 5 already. Number 5, public questions, none. And so we go straight into number 6. And I do want to remind the committee and the opposition leaders speaking under Standing Order 44 that we are dealing with the recommendations, and many of these are going to council in any event. So if we need any thoughts to change, then you need to make that clear on what recommendations you would like us to change. Detailed questions about the recommendations, we'll try to answer them tonight, but specific detail of any particular report may have to come to you in writing. So at a later date, because we need to deal with the recommendations this evening. So we're into item 6, which is the Housing Residents Vulnerability Policy. And here we have 2 recommendations. And so I've got Director for People and Communities, Joe Yellen, and Lawrence will be speaking to these things. Who's going to kick off first? Joe, speak to the report. Lawrence, okay, if you'd like to tell us what the report's about.
Thank you, Chair, and good evening, everybody. This report is asking Executive to recommend to Council the adoption of the new Housing Residents of Vulnerability Policy for 3 years from 2024 to 27. The government introduced a regulator for social housing that started inspecting social landlords from April this year, and there's a lot of learning coming out of those inspections, one of which is the expectation that all social landlords have a vulnerability policy which identifies what is a vulnerability, how we record that vulnerability, and what we will do to ensure that those people with vulnerabilities have equal access to the same services as everybody else within the housing service. I wasn't planning to go into any more detail at this stage, Chair, but happy to take questions.
Thank you, Lawrence. Opposition leaders, is there anything you want to say? Councillor Jobson.
Thank you. It's really with reference to the report. I've no difficulty with the recommendation. Thank you for a very good report. But I did wonder, although there is a separate policy on domestic abuse, as to whether the Domestic Abuse Act should be put in the references, as there are references to domestic abuse in this report.
Okay, thank you. We also deal with wonders as well. We will try to answer that one for you in a minute. Councillor Moore.
Thank you very much, and thank you very much, Lawrence, and your team for your work on this. We've got 3 policies that relate together, and I would like to know, and I don't know if it needs to be a further recommendation about how this policy relates to other policies, so domestic abuse or antisocial behaviour, because one might conflict with the other. And if we get to that point of having to deal with a situation where there is that conflict, which policy would take precedent and how would we handle that? Do we have a protocol?
Okay, thank you. Councillor Mitchell.
Thank you again. No issue with the report or the recommendations, just a point of clarification if possible. Under assessment of vulnerability in section 6, which clearly identifies all the vulnerabilities, etc. My concern is what is your legal right to gather this information? What do you do with, how do you assess this information where the person is unwilling to give you that information?
Thank you. I'll open that up to the rest of the executive. Is there any points, contributions, or questions you would like to raise? No? Okay. Deal with these 2 things. Conflict, if you can deal with that quickly. Conflict, and then what right do you have to get this information?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the questions. So an answer to the first question about the conflict is that each case can be very complicated and has to be taken on its own merits, and that we do desktop reviews at a senior level of any case where we think there may be a conflict between vulnerability and antisocial behaviour. That would include the managers, myself, and our legal team. So there is a desktop review, and we may very well involve other support agencies and other agencies where that's appropriate to agree a best way forward for all concerned. So that's how we try to take that holistic approach. Councillor Mitchell, your question was around whether people don't give that information. Yeah. So when people sign their tenancy agreement, they're signing to share information with us. But of course, if they wish not to share information, that is their choice. But of course, by understanding what people's vulnerabilities are, we are able to tailor our services to give them good service and take reasonable adjustments to give them those services. So in my view, it is in their best interest to do so.
Okay. Thank you, Lawrence. Okay, I've got 2 recommendations here, which I'm going to move from the chair. Can I have a seconder, please? Councillor Wright. All those in favour? I've got 2 recommendations here, 3-2. Oh, it's all part of it. Sorry, I just saw 3-1 and 3-2. Okay. Oh, 2.1, yeah. So there it is, that we approve the adoption, and I've underlined it, of the new housing residents vulnerability policy. I've moved it from the chair. Councillor Wright is seconded. Can I have all those in favour? Thank you very much. Now move on to item 7, which is the housing domestic abuse policy. And here we have 1 recommendation. And again, it's Joe, Yellen, and Lawrence. Lawrence, when you conclude later on, if you could address the chair, it's always best. I want to see what's going on. All right. Thank you, Lawrence.
Thank you, Chair. My apologies. This recommendation is for Executive to recommend and Council to approve the adoption of the housing domestic abuse policy. This is very much in line with the previous report presented, that the housing regulators inspections have identified that rather than including domestic abuse policy within your antisocial behaviour policy and strategy, that it should be a separate document to identify and profile this as the the thing that we need to be sort of very much as an important issue for us to deal with as a social landlord. Again, I've nothing further to add, Chair.
Thank you, Lawrence. Leaders, any questions? No?
Questions.
No?
Just to say
Okay.
report. Thank you.
Councillor Wood.
Thank you. It's a very good report, and it's good to see these two policies coming out. I'm kind of drawn back, I think, to the question you received on the last one, which is what's our legal position on retaining this information, because it's not necessarily voluntary, given over voluntarily, and it may be retracted as well. The nature of domestic violence is very complex and very difficult one to get to the bottom of. So in terms of legal permissions to retain and identify. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Wright.
Thank you. It's just a quick point. Thank you very much for the report and all the work that actually goes on in this area anyway, regardless of the report being written, but everything that the staff do. So thank you for that. I've just got a point to make about the equality impact assessments all the time, because very often things are put down as having no effect because they're having no adverse effect, but this actually has a positive effect. So I really think sometimes on the impact assessments, you shouldn't be shy of saying it has a positive effect, because it absolutely does in this case.
Thank you. And nobody else? Okay, Lawrence, again, that similar question to the first one, and then a nice point at the end.
Thank you, Chair. So with regard to legal permissions, obviously dealing with domestic abuse is a complex area of work for our officers, who do a sterling job, I have to say. But if a person, we will always be centric towards the person, so we will do what they want us to do, and that does mean treading a fine line where we have to support them, but have to be led by them on what actions we take and how we take them. And thank you for the comment, Councillor.
But Councillor Wright was asking, could that be included in future? The positive impacts.
Yes, I will feed that back to the officers, and we'll get that included in time for the full council report, Chair.
Thank you. And so therefore we have one recommendation, which I'm going to move from the chair. Can I have a seconder, please? Councillor Wright. All those in favour of the one recommendation, please show. Thank you very much. We move on to item 8 now, which is the Council Housing Services Antisocial Behaviour Strategy and Policy. And again, we've got a recommendation to recommend to Council to approve the adoption of it. And again, busy night for you, Lawrence. It's over to you for this one.
Thank you, Chair. My last report, I promise. So this report is a refresh of the Council's Housing Antisocial Behaviour Strategy and Policy for the period 24 to 27. We went out using the Council's consultation charter to carry out consultation on this very important document to us in housing. And they've made some really helpful recommendations to us, which we've adopted. This strategy and policy have also been through our tenants group called the Tenants Voice, and through the Council Housing and Development Advisory Board for comment as well. So it's had a lot of people give us a lot of feedback, which has been really gratefully received. It is a legal requirement to have an housing antisocial behaviour policy and strategy. It has been refreshed, as I say, and there's nothing to add, and happy to take questions, Chair.
Thank you very much, Lawrence. Anybody who leads? Councillor Moore.
Thank you very much. And thank you for this work. This is a really complex area, and I know that your team have to deal with some very difficult situations. I'm very pleased that the policy recognises that the responsibility is about tackling ASB in the neighbourhoods where they provide social housing, so it's not just antisocial behaviour between residents. It could be stuff that comes into the area. But what I wanted to know in terms of this policy and how it works is it would be really very helpful. The policy talks about generally first point of contact and how complaints and reports are treated. I think it'd be really very helpful if there's a summary of the stages, the procedure, so people, once they go into the system, know what will happen next. Particularly, for example, that the expectation is to report issues to the police as well as the council housing team, where there does seem to be some confusion. So it's again, it's not quite clear in this policy, but I do think it's really helpful for residents if they know exactly for whom they're meant to speak and what they expect to happen once they've done that. Thank you.
Okay, any other member? Councillor Ashford.
Thank you. It's more of a point than a question. I just want to say for all three reports, thank you very much for all your hard work and your team. And I think judging by the lack of questions, comments, etc., it just goes to show what a great job you've done. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. If there's no other contribution, Councillor Alcock.
Sorry, I do have a question actually. On page 3, you mentioned as part of the government's new action plan, they pledged, or a previous government, I guess at this point, an extra 1 million hours of youth services in areas with the highest rates of ASB, and that in your plan, one of the deliverables will be improve youth provision or working with organisations to support that. I'm just curious, does Exeter benefit from any of that government support, and what is your thinking on how that will be delivered here?
Okay, thank you. There are Lawrence, if you can deal with that last one, and also what was raised about it being clear for residents in the process, basically.
Thank you, Chair. With regard to the first question, we will put on our website and at the first point of contact with someone who's reporting antisocial behaviour to us, we will set out what we will do and what our action plan is. We also undertake to give the person making the report an action plan, setting out what action we will take, but also setting out what action we would expect of them. So, for example, on many cases, we ask people to keep a diary sheets of the date and times of when the news or the disturbances is happening, and that helps us gather evidence for cases. So we will set out an action plan which will set out what actions our officers will take and what we would expect the person making the report to do. With regard to the second question, thank you very much. I'm not aware of what funding is coming to us, but the housing service has previously and does support things like youth buses in certain parts of the city. So where those kind of funding arrangements are in place, we normally make a contribution to support those kind of activities in the city. I will be happy to give you more detail once we've got a bit more detail of the funding. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Lawrence. Okay, so here we are. We've got one recommendation here, which I'm going to move from the chair. Can I have a seconder, please? Councillor Wright. All those in favour of the recommendation, please show. Thank you very much. Then move on to item 9, which is the Community Grants Programme for 25-26. And here we have at least 6 recommendations, which I believe Joe Yelland is going to talk to the recommendations in the paper.
So hopefully the recommendations are self-explanatory once you've read the body of the report. But just in summary, the report sets out proposals that we see each year for the Community Grants Programme and for the funding of Wellbeing Exeter beyond March 2025. And the reason this is discussed here separately each year is currently the funding in the main comes from the neighbourhood portion of the Community Infrastructure Levy. So the 6 recommendations, as I said, relate to the body of the report. The first 2 are requesting that you note the update of progress on the transition of Wellbeing Exeter and the community programme, which was something that was requested of the executive in September 2023, and that's in the body of the report. And also asking you to note the match funding for Wellbeing Exeter has now been agreed with Sport England for the next 3 years. And as a consequence, the following 2 recommendations relate to the allocation of funding from the neighbourhood cell to match the funding from Sport England. and also identifying that there is a ring-fence wellbeing Exeter reserve of £72,000, which is funding that's come from previous non-ECC funders, which is why it's in a ring fence for Wellbeing Exeter, and just putting that money forward for financial year 26-27 in order to reduce the burden on the neighbourhood cell. The remaining two recommendations relate to the use of the neighbourhood cell. So 2.5 is a contingency requesting delegated authority to the portfolio holder and myself to adjust the funding downwards for Wellbeing Exeter in the annual contract negotiations should anticipated receipts in the neighbourhood cell fail to materialise. This is quite an important issue because, as you know, we can only spend the neighbourhood cell once we've received it, and whilst, as the body of the report sets out, we're very confident in the assessments that have been made by our planning and finance colleagues in terms of the financial health of the neighbourhood cell, this is here as a contingency should the extraordinary happen and we are no longer in a position to be able to meet these quantums from the neighbourhood cell. And again, in relation to the neighbourhood cell, the final recommendation is requesting authority for myself and the portfolio holder to set out a public consultation on the future and the ongoing use of the neighbourhood cell in terms of that the last time we undertook the statutory consultation was in 2019, and it's probably a good moment in time to test out, to feedback to the community how the money has been spent, and then to seek feedback on any future proposals for how members might want to spend the money in the future. Thank you.
Just before we go, if you can help me on page 101, the table just before 8.11 tells us in year 2 and 3 external funding to be secured of 71,000 and then 195. Is there any thoughts on that, or is that just the number to make the totals add and you've got to go and find that? I'm just curious about that.
So that's minimum contribution that we would expect with Wellbeing Exeter now stabilised in terms of the funding commitment made by the council last year, and should these recommendations be agreed and taken forward, we think that the case for investment that we published last year, and I say that we was the Wellbeing Exeter partners, we think that Wellbeing Exeter is really well placed to be able to secure funding from third-party investors, and this is just the beginning of setting some clear targets for the Wellbeing Exeter partners to start to work towards.
Thank you for that. I thought, I was curious about that. Opposition leaders, Councillor Moore.
Thank you for the report. I have a number of issues. I would like to know more about, well, the case for investment came to the council, and last year we had a presentation and a workshop around the future of Wellbeing Exeter when that funding was being looked at, and as part of those discussions there was talk about producing a business plan for that investment, an evaluation strategy because there had been none to that point, and also a fundraising plan. So it looks like that's taking quite some time to actually develop if that's not coming forward until next year. I also, the report talks about where this responsibility lies and talks here about recommendations to the portfolio holder, but the decision from 2019 talks about the strategic oversight and leadership of the Exeter Grants Programme, the grants panel, and the grants panel hasn't seen this report. And I think there are a number of issues which come up that are listed in this report which need to be discussed in a strategic way in that place as mandated by that report. For example, in 2019 it talked about having a crowdfunding platform, but now we've ended up with a lottery. Talked about building capacity of the voluntary sector. We've had that for a while in Exeter, and that was really good, but now it's been talked about how that's going to be included in networking through Wellbeing Exeter. Improving evaluation, we haven't had any discussion about evaluation at all, and strengthening asset transfer, which currently is still sort of, I'm not clear about how that's happened. So Wellbeing Exeter and the community builders are doing really excellent work. I want to be really clear about that. This issue is around the governance in relation to how the council is managing this work and developing it. So I'm not quite sure about the recommendations, to be honest, because I feel that we need to be clear about where that accountability lies within the council. And I do welcome the fact about the consultation needs to happen with communities. There hasn't been sort of particular reporting back on the money spent today, but I would want to see it sooner than 26, 27. That's quite a long way ahead, and the still regulations are quite clear about the need to report back and consult with communities on the expenditure of neighbourhoods still. Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Mitchell.
Just following on from Councillor Moore a little, I'm somewhat concerned there isn't within this report, and where it is separate, now following on from that meeting, that members briefing meeting we had, for the business case to justify the amount of money that's going to this one organisation within Exeter and in the second year as well, because I'd like to know what the outcome model is and what our value for money is, and we haven't had a value for money report, as far as I'm concerned, on the investment Exeter has put in and is continuing to put in if we accept this recommendation.
Okay, I'll open up. Oh, Councillor Johnson.
I'd just like to follow on. Thank you. I'd like to sort of follow on from that. It is the evaluation. I mean, how many people are being signposted? How successful is that signposting? What are the long-term results, etc., etc. I certainly think we need some sort of report as to the achievements, one hopes, rather than the people who are signposted for a little while and then drop off the log, so to speak.
Okay, thank you. Any other members of the committee? I'll come to you at the end, Councillor. Councillor Wood.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just thinking about the work that we've already, thinking about the work that's already been done. I know that there's been some great evaluation work that's been done on this, and that a lot of it is kind of unlocking into what is a business case, because we do need to sustain this, and it shouldn't be down to us, just for us and Sports England to pay for it, because there are many organisations that benefit from it, in addition to obviously the individuals concerned. So yeah, just wondering if we could give a little bit more information on kind of headlines for the successes that we've had to date, as to give us some indication of the successes that will be achieved through this funding. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. If there's nobody else, I'll come to Councillor Vizard.
Thank you very much. I seem to be benefiting from a little bit of paper being stuffed between the machine and the microphone here, so hopefully won't need to hold it. Thank you for the excellent reports, very useful and timely. I think one of the reasons why it's important that it comes forward now is to ensure that CoLab and Wellbeing Exeter therefore have some security and certainty about their funding going forward, so that they can ensure staff are contracted and so forth. So that's hence the importance of getting this through sooner rather than later. Obviously very welcome that we have the Sports England money secured and that we're improving the match funding. Very welcome that we've protected our city grants and our ward grants, which I'm sure councillors will welcome, as will the community groups. So no reduction there in the same levels as they are currently, which is fantastic. And a reminder, I think, that the development that we see in the city, which is so often controversial, contributes to this pot of money that benefits all of our neighbourhoods and communities. So it is thanks to that neighbourhood still money from development that we can do this. So that's really key to mention. I'm sure Joe will come back on some of the questions raised, but I'm aware there has been a case for support published in the last year and an evaluation survey. So that Joe can talk more about that perhaps. Also, I think welcome and in this report is some funding for our some audit, really effectively of some of the community buildings to go forward to look at conditions of those and assess what we need to do there. So this is really a rich report full of detail and really important aspects. Really encouraged too that it allows some opportunities going forward, which we absolutely need to talk to the communities about feedback. That's really important, and I think really needs to come forward. There's quite a bit of work to be done here, and I think we recognise that. So very much welcome it. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Before I come to you, Joe, if you can just, I mean, on page 97, the report details 8 tells us a lot. I'm trying to think about Councillor Jobson's remarks about assessment and what was going on there, and also some of the work. So I don't really want to get into too much detail of all of that, nor where there's no recommendation from any of the members to change the recommendations. So, but of course, these recommendations are open to be changed at a council meeting, you know, so if that's where that debate should be. And can you just, because I'm curious about this, because the grants panel does not deal with the neighbourhood sill. I'm right in the thought, right? The executive and council deals with that. However, we allocate for grants a certain amount of money through the council, and that's what the grants panel deals with. That's correct. So there's no need for them to view this as a committee, obviously as councillors they can and bring forward. But am I right in assuming that? Can you anyway? If I can just tidy that up.
Yes, thank you, Chair. You're absolutely correct. So there are very clear terms of reference for the community grants panel, and that's around, it's a member-led panel where members make the decisions on the allocation of community grants. You're absolutely right that it's not appropriate that the grants panel makes decisions about the funding, the allocation of the funding of the neighbourhood sill. To date, that process has always been through the committee process, through the executive and to council. The report, my apologies of any misunderstandings, but this report was never intended to be a report on the effectiveness of Wellbeing Exeter. And as some of the members have already mentioned, there is a business case which is called the Case for Support, which sets out what Wellbeing Exeter has to offer and options for investors who may wish to become involved in the funding and ongoing support for Wellbeing Exeter. And that is still a live, relevant document available and used in discussions with potential funders for either the core model, which is what the council funds in the main, as to Sport England, and for what we called enhanced models, which allows investors to come along for a particular focus that they might wish to have in terms of community development in the city. In terms of evaluation, Wellbeing Exeter is one of the most evaluated projects I've ever known. It's over 10 years old, and its origins came from funds from the government through the Transformation Challenge Award, which had a requirement that all projects funded had to have a certain percentage of their investment used for evaluation. So right from day one, Wellbeing Exeter has been evaluated intensively. That has followed through in the most recent years with the requirement from Sport England that 10% of all of their grant funding we receive from Sport England has to be committed to evaluating the Sport England programmes. So the impact report of Wellbeing Exeter was published last March, and that was a position statement on all of the various evaluations that have taken place of the 10 years of Wellbeing Exeter's life cycle at that point, and was highly sophisticated report that used a number of meta-analyses looking at a variety of different evaluation techniques for how do you identify what impact community programmes have, particularly people-based programmes. So I would recommend and remind members that those reports are available online. So that tradition of Wellbeing Exeter's evaluation continues. So the contract that we have placed with the lead organisation for the next 3 years, which is CoLab, has got within that contract requirements of contract evaluation, but on top of that is the Sport England requirement for even further evaluation, which will be subject to a new evaluation contract that will be tendered for the next 3 years as part of our commitment to the ongoing of the deepening funding from Sport England. Also, just want to clarify that Wellbeing Exeter is not an organisation. It is an alliance of a variety of different voluntary and community sector organisations. And so the funding that goes into CoLab gets fed out through CoLab into a range of organisations in the city who employ the community builders, the community physical activity organisers, and the community connectors. I don't know if I've answered all of the questions because there were lots of them, but I'm happy to come back if there's more that you
Joe, you've
need.
more than ably answered the issues as far as I'm concerned, and if any member wants some further information, do you mind if I suggest they email you and you will direct them to where this information lies and has been for some time in any event? Thank you. So we've got the 6 recommendations there. I'm going to move the 6 recommendations from the chair. Can I have a seconder, please? That's Councillor Wright. All those in favour of the recommendations, please show.
Unanimous, Chair.
Thank you very much. We now move on to item 10, which is the final report of the Devon Housing Commission. And there's a recommendation here that we note the content of this report, and it's including the recommendations in the context of addressing housing challenges in Exeter. And I believe this one is going to be you, Ian.
Thank you, Chair. So this report explains some of the background and summarises those key recommendations that are contained in the Devon Housing Commission's final report and their relevance to Exeter. I also understand that most, if not all, of the other Devon district authorities have taken similar reports through their democratic processes. The report itself, which was published in July, after a year-long process of gathering evidence and engaging key stakeholders, that's available on the council's website, and there is a link to the report embedded in this paper. So a bit of background about the commission itself. It's the Devon Housing Commission. It's an independent body that was set up by the Devon Housing Task Force, which itself is an informal group represented by each of the Devon districts and the county council. And those Devon districts and the county council funded the work of the commission. The commission itself was chaired by Lord Richard Best and is hosted by the University of Exeter, who provided the secretariat and some professional advisors, particularly those relating to the data gathering. The commission's brief was Devon-wide to take an in-depth look at the local housing markets across Devon and the key delivery challenges. The City Council gave evidence to the Commission in January, and that was part of a day-long visit to Exeter hosted by Devon County Council. So the report itself, in his foreword to the report, Lord Best says that there is a housing crisis in Devon, and the key recommendation in the report is that urgent action is needed to tackle this. So the report goes into great detail about the key issues and challenges and makes a whole host of recommendations on how those issues can be addressed through collaboration. There is quite a long list of issues, as you can imagine, but I've boiled those down to 2 interrelated challenges. The difficulty in building enough homes to meet all of our housing needs and affordability. There are 2 sections in the Commission's report which specifically focus on Exeter in reviewing the challenges about delivering brownfield development and also the affordability of student accommodation. I'm sure that members will appreciate that there's already a lot of work going on by the council to address our housing needs in the city, and that work is across a range of services and within all the directorates of the council. There's an additional challenge as well for Exeter, which is possibly unique within Devon, and that's to do with the tight administrative boundaries of the city. So the report does recognise that and does conclude
that Exeter does need to have a close relationship with its neighbours and work collaboratively as part of that Devon-wide collective. So thank you. That is a very short summary of a very detailed report, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Yes, thank you. Just before I go, it is an important document, and actually it's a pick up and put down read. So I suggest to people, if you're up tonight listening, wait for the results, pick this up and read this in between, because it is worth a read, to be quite honest. Curious to note, just to start the discussion, in the 2011 census, the average age of people in Exeter was 35. You look at the census of 2021, and you look at all the other districts other than Exeter, they're all getting older by about 10 years. And this makes me feel better because we're all staying the same at the average age of 35 here in Exeter. So, but that does demonstrate the age profile and the unique differences of Exeter and what we need to deal with. I don't think this report actually reflects all of that, but we deal with that as well. And also a proud thing, although it brings us our issues within the report, Ian, is also the number of our homes in the housing stock. We are the biggest outside of East Devon, which is major, which is something I think all councillors, regardless of party, is proud of. However, that brings a number of other issues with it about maintenance, heating, fuel poverty, and all that sort of stuff that we're dealing with. So it is a good report, and if I can add to the debate before we go, and I'm sorry, I'm normally coming at the end. This was sort of commissioned by all the Devon districts. We chipped in towards it. It was important. It forms a very important base. There's a lot of reference to it about the combined authority and what they will and do. I just want to assure people, because all of the districts are very, I won't say possessive, but proud of their right to deal with the housing. Although there are three districts which have no housing at all, which is owned by them. It's all done by social providers other than that, which says something. So that brings them unique differences. But this is something that we're dealing with, but we are not handing over control of our housing stock. We're not handing over control of our planning or our anything in relation to any of that to a combined authority or to other councils. We still run our issues, but we're got an area to collaborate on all of this to bring forward, because as you say, we have to work with other authorities. So I just wanted to assure people before we get into the debate that this housing report is not sort of constraining us at all. It's there to help and support. So with that, I'll be quiet and I'll say if there's any of the leaders wish to come in. Councillor Mitchell.
Thank you, Ian, for the outline report you gave. As I say, it is an important document. Sadly, I've read it before tonight, so I'll have to find something else to read later on this evening. What concerns me, often you get these very well written, drafted expert reports, and they just gather dust on the shelf until the next 10 years comes and another report gets written. I would hope with the essential nature of this report for the future of Devon and for the people who live in Devon, that some action can be taken on this to drive it forward. And obviously through our MPs, etc., we can work through central government. But the one thing I would like to emphasise is that there are recommendations in this report specifically for district councils to carry out. There are 13 of them. And I would hope the leader could give us an assurance that within a reasonable period of time, we'll get a response from Exeter City Council to those 13 bullet points, whether we agree with them and whether we can put them into action. Because clearly we've got to show to the people of Devon and the people of Exeter, yes, we do support this document and we want to see it carried through. And also in his other role, could I also ask the leader to pursue the combined authority to make sure they take up the 6 that fall into their ambit within this report? Because the report is excellent, it is detailed, and it does give us a way forward, because in Devon we do need a way forward to help resolve the housing crisis.
Thank you. Councillor Moore.
Thank you. My point is similar but slightly different. I obviously this puts front and centre the real problem that we have in the county around affordability, so it spells it out in no uncertain terms. I obviously think that councils was part of the solution to providing affordable housing. I also recognise and welcome the recognition of community land trusts. I think that's really important, and it's something we haven't done in Exeter, though there have been for many years groups that are very keen to do this. So the recommendation is to note this, and like Councillor Mitchell, I'd like to know what we're now going to do with it. I think there are a number of strategic questions about how we move forward with some of these things, and which things need further investigation because they might have implications on the work of district councils, particularly if we're looking at a county-wide development corporation. That could be a positive thing, or it could have some quite serious implications for our role as a inmate generation and also in terms of planning. So I think we perhaps need to do more than note, and I look forward to hearing what that might be. Thank you.
Okay, is there Councillor Williams?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, it's a very interesting report, but I must say I'm a bit disappointed that Exeter section 3.1 only deserves sort of a single page, whereas the Exeter University student gets 4 pages with a lot of detail. Anyway, very useful, important information. I have to say, I was very interested to read in table 3.1 that they're suggesting that HMO houses and multiple occupancy, shared accommodation, looks to be dropping. I think that's something that we could probably contribute to the whether that's true or not by looking at whether we are increasing the number of properties that are paying council tax. Because if you've got an HMO which is full of students, they don't have to pay council tax. So I'd be interested to know whether that is reflected in our council tax take, because it also sort of goes counter really to the fact that we've increased our Article 4 areas because there's more and more houses appear to be converting to HMOs. So I'd like to find out a bit more what's happening, and I'm not asking you to do it now, Ian, but maybe you would like to comment on why the students actually deserve 4 pages and the rest of Exeter housing only gets a page. Thank you.
Okay, anybody else? Councillor Wright.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, it's a big report. I was involved not at all in the writing of this report, obviously, but right at the beginning on the task force with the other districts, and it was very interesting because there was obviously issues that we face in Exeter were quite unique, as issues faced in Ilfracombe quite unique to them. So a lot that was coming out of this was very much about the second homes and the holiday homes, but unique to Exeter perhaps in Devon was the student population aspect of things. So that has come out through this report, but maybe in a slightly different way than I was expecting it to after it came out the sausage machine, sort of referencing Councillor Williams' thing, comment there. The recommendations, yeah, I would just like to know really what is going to happen next with this. I mean, one key recommendation there is to have somebody in place overseeing all of this and talking to developers, and that's very much part of your job for us as a district council, but I'm sure you'd like somebody else in place doing that alongside you as well. We're not in a position to do that. How many of these recommendations are we going to try and work with, and what sort of vehicle are we going to be doing that through? Where's the discussion going to be? Is there going to be discussion as to how to look at these recommendations and what we feel would be worth taking through?
Okay, anybody else? Before you come in on Ian, on some of that. I mean, I suppose we've got a bit of context on what this report is meant to be doing for us, because yeah, I'd like it to think is there you are. We got a report that's housing sorted. It's not quite like that. What will happen? This was done by the Devon districts and Team Devon, and as you know, we will. I've sent some stuff out to you. I'm waiting for some more information from the districts in relation to what will happen with the combined authority and who sits on what and how's it's going. And when we've got more information, I do want to actually advise where we sit in all of that, because it's quite still not quite sure. However, where we sit with housing is still a matter for the districts. We will be part of the joint committee, which has got all the districts on, feeding into the CCA, and there will be members sat on the CCA from the districts. I'm hoping that Exeter will have a voice in all of that, and we're working hard to ensure our voice is there. So there will be if not a housing, and you can come in and fill in the bits in a moment, Ian, a housing, not quite a task force, but the joint committee of all the districts will be setting up a separate housing thing, of which in the initial stage, the leaders or appropriate portfolio owners will be involved to look at this, to see what we can do. So that's where it's going to be done. It's not, there you are, district councils, you now have to get on and you've got to tell you, we'll mark the homework for you. And we need to look at it collaboratively with our partners that where we've had this discussion, because it is not as if only we could just sort everything out like this. So there's still work to be done and reports to be coming back on that. So I envisage that when the CCA takes shape, and that's going through Parliament, and this parliamentary order is going through now as we speak. And once we've done that and we've actually sat with all the leaders and everybody to determine who sits on what and how we're going to deal with that. But Exeter will be on that housing. We won't be excluded, and we will have a role in that. We are not going to be dictated to, we're not going to be outvoted on. I want to make sure people understand that. So it is very much happening at the moment on how this comes. But this report is quite important of when we will be going to government for future demands upon housing, Homes England and all that sort of stuff, and all the support, because we actually had Homes England at a meeting. We went out to County Hall, so they have been involved. So there is quite a big discussion on all of that. So I think what I intend to do following this discussion is to take this way, have a chat with the chief executive and of course you, Ian, on how we are going to, what we need to do with this and how we do it, and bring some sort of report back to what we can and can't action and whatever. But that is just me looking at it from a political point of view, being mindful of what is being said, because as I said, this isn't the panacea. That's going to, I nearly said trump everything. I'm not going to use that phrase, but it isn't going to make everything happen for us. So Ian, if you can fill in some bits, pieces, and make sense of a little bit of what I've said.
Thank you, Chair. I will have to come back to Councillor Williams about the HMO question, I'm afraid, but we will come back to you on that one. In terms of the question about the balance of information in the report about Exeter, I have to say it's not our report, but we did provide very detailed evidence to the Commission. A 10-page summary of that is actually appended to this executive paper, but there was an awful lot more work that went into that evidence, and the teams across the directorates put a lot of time and resource into providing evidence to the Commission. So all I can say is we did our part in that respect, but it's not our final report. In terms of the recommendations, they cover districts, but also the combined authority, as the leader has suggested, but also some of those recommendations of a government as well. And indeed, in terms of the work of the proposed combined authority, there is a shadow advisory group that has been proposed. In fact, there's a report coming to executive next month to seek a nomination, councillor nomination, to take part in that advisory group, and that will report directly into the combined authority should that be actually created. So Exeter will have a voice, and there will be voting rights in that advisory body. I'm not quite sure what they'll be voting on because it is only advisory, but nevertheless that will be part of it. And I've already mentioned, and I think all the members of the executive know this, that huge amount of work goes on in Exeter by all of our services to tackle our housing needs. It's one of the big things that this council does, and that's right across all services, and that'll continue. A lot of the things that are mentioned in the report in terms of recommendations we're doing already, but that work never stops, does it? And there's always a need to continue that. I would welcome an opportunity to come back at a later date and say a bit more about how we're responding to the recommendations as a district authority, but also how we're working collaboratively with our neighbours and our partners such as Homes England to tackle the housing issues that we're aware of.
Thank you. Just before I put it to the point, just to say that there's quite a lot of moving parts in all of this, and I think what we will do is, at the very least, if not a report to executive or whatever, a members briefing once we've found out about the status of the CCA, what's going on in there, how this interacts with it, what you've just said. I think we need an all members briefing because I think members want to know and want to understand, and we can discuss this document and what we think about it and whatever else. And actually, not all ideas are in this document. We may have a few as well. If you know what I mean, we're not going to be just blind into it. There's things that we want to see and we want to do, and I feel sure we could have a look at that. And I know that's another evening's briefing, everybody. That we yet another one. But anyway, Chief Executive.
Just very briefly, Chair, to say that on Tuesday the 19th, there's actually an all members conversation with the leader of Devon County Council. So no doubt some discussion could be had there.
Yes, although primarily budget, you're quite right. Yes, let's give him a, yeah. Right, yeah, well, I think that's good. Yeah, we will. Don't go tipping him off. Yeah, a warm welcome. Yeah, we always do. Okay, so we've got a recommendation there, and much follow. It is an important document. I know it's just that we're noting the content of it, and we can have a discussion at council. There may be a bit more to say it because it's a recommendation to council. It's not a resolved matter, is it? No. So it'll go to council as well, and there may be a discussion, and I may be in a position to update people with a bit more information as who's doing what. This is a moving thing, and we need those discussions. And James McInnes, nice chap, he'll be here, and we can ask him too. So we've got the recommendation there. I'm going to move it from the chair. I've got a seconder, Councillor Wright. All those in favour of the recommendation, please show. Thank you very much. That brings us to the end of the agenda. It's fireworks night. Let's hope we all wake up tomorrow and it's a good feeling we've got. I don't know. Let's hope so. Anyway, that's the trouble, you see.
Well,